Hey y'all, coming to you from the midst of Tropical Storm Beta. I wish that there was a way to tie in this week's lectionary content to the storm, but alas, I am at a loss. So I'm just gonna roll with it and give you guys the cool views of these magnificent waves coming through here safe in my car where I don't even get to feel the rain. But today's lectionary story is another parable told by Jesus, right? This is an interesting one. Parables Jesus uses to try and get at, kind of in a sideways fashion, these things that are hard to describe using literal terms, right? You can say things like, this is what we believe about God. He's omnipotent. He's all-powerful. He's omnipresent, all these things like that. And you can talk about what the kingdom of heaven might be like. But those things are kind of abstract, and it's hard to get specific language around them, right? And Jesus' parables offer a great alternative to kind of get things through a sideways manner. Like, what is this like? Maybe I'm not saying what it 100% is, and maybe it's not one-to-one, but it's kind of like this, or it's kind of like that. So I really like looking at the parables to try and gain this deeper understanding of what Jesus is talking about. And this week's parable is a really interesting one. It tells the story of a landowner who had a bunch of land that needed to be farmed. So he hired some farmers early in the morning to come in, 9 a.m., clocking in. Then middle of the day, he hired some more workers right around lunchtime. And then towards the end of the day, maybe 3 p.m., he hired even some more workers to work this farm until the end of the day, 5 p.m., right? That's closing time, quitting time, everyone's favorite time of day. But the interesting thing is, this farmer pays all those workers the same, whether they worked the full 9 to 5 or only worked a few hours. This upsets the people that were coming in at 9 a.m. because they think they have earned more pay, right? This is how our society and a lot of societies across the world seem to function, right? We think that because you work harder, maybe you deserve more money, you deserve to be paid more. And while we can debate whether or not that's the ethical system, all day, I don't think that's what Jesus is necessarily here to talk about, right? What Jesus is talking about is how the kingdom of heaven is fundamentally totally different than the way our societies are run, right? We at least say we want to run our societies in this way, where if you work hard, you get paid more. And Jesus is saying that's not what heaven is like at all. That's not how God operates. See, God doesn't operate based off of merit or what you've earned, and we should be thankful for that, because if that's how God worked, then we probably wouldn't get a whole lot, because we mess up a whole lot. We haven't always earned the things that we want. Instead, God's overwhelming grace consumes us all, right? It is, enough to get by, right? The text specifically says that he paid those workers their daily wage, whether they'd worked a few hours or worked all day. And I kind of think that that's maybe a bit how God's grace works. So we get our daily grace almost, right? Our daily bread, as the Lord's Prayer would say. We get the grace that we need for that day, and the next day we get more grace, and we keep getting more grace the whole rest of our lives. This is really interesting because that's not how we operate, right? We assume that maybe, the pastor up there on the stage, or the person that you really respect because they spend a lot of time studying the word and reading, theological texts or something like that, that they're, because they do those things, better people, right? That they're more holy. Maybe they've earned a higher spot in heaven. They get to sit closer to God, and their homes, God's live in the center, and maybe they live in the same neighborhood, whereas everyone else gets to live in the outskirts of town, far away from God or something. But that's not how God works, right? God tells us here in this story that none of us are deserving like that, and that it's simply through the grace of God that we have anything, right? That we are able to go to heaven, that we are able to experience communion with God here on earth. And this would have been very contrary to the way that the society at that time ran, right? That the Pharisees, who are so often talked about in the gospel texts, would have been people that dedicated their whole lives since they were very young to studying the scriptures, right? The Hebrew scriptures that we have collected now in the Old Testament, but that was all that they had back then, right? That was their holy texts, and they dedicated their whole life to studying it. And Jesus is coming in and kind of directly challenging that order, saying, look, just because you've studied all these texts, maybe you don't even understand how God works, despite all of this study, all this time that you've spent looking at. You've missed the forest for the trees. That God is a graceful God who comes in and gives us all our daily wage like the farmer does. No matter if we have been studying our whole lives to understand what God is like, or whether or not we have only recently started really understanding or attempting to understand who God is and God's love for us. So I know some days I'm more like the people that were there and have been working since they were kids. I think, man, like I have it all figured out. I have learned everything that there is to know about God, right? As ridiculous as that sounds. And I get mad at, who are these new people that come in and think they know so much? They're trying to teach me something. And other times I am those new people, right? I think, wow, I'm in the presence of these people that have spent so much, and I'm only aware of how little I actually know. But whether we are those people from the beginning of the day or the people that only recently have started working the fields, the point is that God gives us all grace equally. God extends to us the grace that we need, not the grace that we have deserved. So when we're in either of those situations, I think it's important for us to take a moment and reflect. Am I acting like those people that have been working all day in the morning and thinking, man, like who are these people to tell me what they have deserved? I'm the one who's put in the work. Or are we like the people that have come in at the end of the day? Are we maybe more aware of the grace that God has given us because we know exactly how little we've worked? Let's try and think about that and try and live our way in a community where we understand, like, look, we're all going to be different. We're all going to have different understandings and different levels of understanding, but God has extended grace to all of us, right? Whether or not we think that some people might deserve it more than others, that's not how God works. So who do we think we are in the eyes of God, and how are we going to then approach his radical grace to all of us, whether we've worked for it a little bit or not?